Classes in session.
Welcome to Unlearn 16 classes in session, guys. I've done it again. Should I say, oops, I've done it again? I feel a Brittany moment coming
Oops, you did it again.
I got Stu back. But today we're not going to talk about Brittany, although I guess we could.
No,
We could inadvertently talk about Brittany. Today, Stu and I are going to talk a little seriously, maybe a little angrily, maybe a little, I don't know, in a frustrated tenor, speak about what's going on both in the United States and in Canada when it comes to the gender debate, gender socialization, and the switch in focus seemingly, especially in US politics, and we're starting to hear rumblings up here, really targeting trans people, trans rights, trans athletes. That's where it all started, really. It's in a moment, and trans teens, and what all of it means, and how we sort of see it and shape it and sort of conceive of it. What do you think, Stu?
I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. I think it's something that we can definitely talk about as allies, and really touch on some of the topics that I think are affecting not only our societal world, but also the political structures around us and how they're being targeted, especially I will say mostly as of right now, I would say that most publicly is in the States. But you're getting
Oh yeah,
bits
you see it.
in Canada, more in the news.
You see them sort of picking up on pieces of it, changing the education system
Yeah.
in provincial offices. Pierre Poliev he's definitely talking about it in his roundabout way, which makes me even more nervous.
I think it's.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead first.
Before we get into it, I want everybody who is listening or watching to understand that I do not identify as a trans person. I'm saying something serious, and Stu had a. Can you lift that? Are you okay? I'm sorry.
It's my emotional
Stu has
support
a
water.
water bottle the size of. If I knew what a carburetor was or how big it was, it's ginormous.
It's my emotional support water bottle. It's a gallon of water.
Okay.
I heard from someone that makes you look younger when you drink a lot of water.
So
I've
that's
yet
it.
to see
So
that.
you're just gonna. There's
Yeah.
also something called liquid toxicity. You should look into that.
I
Careful.
can't because then I'll think I'm dying. Why do you want me to die?
Listen, I just want you to be informed. So before we get into this,
I also do not identify as a trans person either. I identify as a cisgendered white gay male.
there we
The
go.
weakest of the links.
And I identify as a cis. There's a lot. We when you identify, I mean, we're getting a bigger and bigger list, right? I identify as cis, gendered, white, female, lesbian. But it's funny. So let's start at the beginning, because what I want to make this conversation really accessible to, obviously, the people that are allies and that are educated or that are trans or that have studied this kind of stuff in school. It's easy. They get it. That's not the people I want to reach out to, and I want to reach out to them with uh, no animosity, no anger, no anything. I just want to create a conversation where the average person who isn't living in this world, who doesn't have access, who doesn't have these people, in their space, so they can understand what we're talking about, why we're talking about it, and how dangerous all the other sort of conversations are happening.
Yeah.
So let's start at the basics. Can you define for our listeners the difference between sex and gender? We're going to start right there.
I think this is a really interesting thing because you can look at the gender unicorn. Do you know the gender unicorn? Do you ever talk to your students about gender unicorn? So gender unicorn. So gender identity is basically how you present. So it's female, male, female, woman, girl, male, man, boy, and other genders are there as well. So that's your gender identity. Gender expression is how you are expressing your gender out into the world. So whether it's feminine clothes, masculine clothes, or others, so you're feminine, masculine presenting. And then the sex assigned at birth is female, male, and intersex or other. And then your sexuality is who you're attracted to,
There we
and
go.
you're emotionally attracted to is like who you're emotionally attracted to as well. And I think this is a really, really interesting way of talking about it because it allows people to kind of be able to kind of talk through the different levels, and it
Mhm.
puts it in a really, really interesting and easy to kind of understand way for not only kids and teenagers but also the parents who kind of go home with them, because I think that with such a very, very um, convoluted, very multi-layered conversation, um, that definitely has a lot of nuance in it. um,
And that's important. I'm gonna let you continue to
yeah,
explain it in a second, but I want everybody to understand that very few issues, if any, are ever straightforward or ever easily
right,
answered, especially easily articulated. They involve conversation and debate and nuance. And my problem with the right is a lot of the times when you simplify something, it makes it sound really nice on Twitter, sound really nice on a banner. But what you've done is you've totally blown up any actual conversation about the issue at hand. And that's what probably makes me the most infuriated, right? And we get this whole thing with, well, define a woman. Uh, and they're trying to get you in a got you moment so then they can just carry
yeah.
on with their day, not actually talk about what that means. So, okay, so we got sex, how you were born. Let's say
So
your
yeah,
parts.
let's here. So let's just. I'm gonna actually do it. 'Cause I used to do this at work a lot.
All right,
My other
I'm
job,
ready.
I used to do a lot of this. So, gender identity is how I identify. So it's one's internal sense of being male, female, neither of these, both, or any other genders. For transgender people, it's their own internal sense of gender identity, and their sex assigned at birth are not the same. So their like internal sense of what their gender may be. Whether it's in the binary, outside of the binary, that's not the one that was assigned to. It's not doesn't relate to how they're assigned at birth. Gender expression or presentation is how I look and how I express myself. So the physical manifestation of one's gender identity through clothing, hairstyle, voice, body shape, etc. So most transgender people, and again, this is a sweeping statement that we kind of make in this training, seek to make their gender expression match their gender identity. So how they outwardly look to
Fantastic.
people and how they feel inside, rather than the sex they were assigned at birth. And the sex assigned at birth is a sex classification that I was assigned at birth. The assignment and classification of people as male, female, intersex, and any other sex based on a combination of anatomy, hormones, chromosomes. This is usually decided at birth or in utero, and is usually based on your genitalia. And then it's like sexually attracted to. So whom I am sexually attracted to, and that's a group of people or genders to which a person can become sexually attracted to. And I think this is where we have romantically and emotionally attracted to. So who I am romantically or emotionally attracted to. So for me as a gay man, I'm sexually attracted to men, but also emotionally and romantically attracted to men as well. And the my gender identity and my gender expression are the same because it's how I feel most comfortable. But I think this is where most people um, tend to get them confused. They think the gender relates to the sex of your who you're sexually attracted to. Um, and again, like other genders, I want to just make sure we are other genders that have kind of been added to this gender marker. Could be agender, bigender, gender fluid, gender queer, transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and two-spirit, which is for our indigenous and native folk.
That's a lot.
I know, and this is the
Like
thing.
I'm
It's like,
in the community, right, Stu? I'm in the
mhm,
community. I've gone to the classes. I
yeah,
teach it. And I listen to that and I go, that that's a lot. And I think here's what where this is where we run into it. I think people hear that, even if they get to this point and
yeah,
go, I'm out. That's too much.
right, yes,
And not
yes,
purposely, not because they're bad people, but
no, no,
because
no,
that's a lot of conceptualization of an individual's identity that most people never, ever challenge.
right,
So I think to a lot of people, it just sounds overwhelming. Can I boil it down just
Yeah,
how I see it real
yeah, of
quick?
course.
And then we can go from that. So, yeah, sex. Listen, we're not going to talk there. From what I understand, there are 8 identifiable scientific chromosomal differences that can indicate different sexes at birth. We're not going to go through all of that. I am not a biologist. I would just like to put it on the table so we all understand and accept the reality they exist. And I think the more we can say things like that simplistically, there are not only 2 sexes, the other
Yes.
6 exist. I don't care what percentage. I don't
Hmm.
care. I don't care how many. Have you ever met somebody? I don't care. I don't care about all of that. What I care about is having an acceptance level on from the onset that sex isn't even binary.
Hmm.
It just isn't, right? Naturally, in nature, it is not even binary. So,
Well,
but
the word sex alone is so vague.
right,
It's just it's it's a word. It's often the word defined and how it looks in terms of transphobia. So people are invalidating the experiences of those who are arguing against such a vaguely defined word.
right. Well, it's so funny because I get those people, what is a woman? And I'm like, I don't know, what's your definition? I think that's
Right.
a hard definition. What's yours? And they always come back with whatever they looked up in the Oxford Dictionary, which says a fully adult female. I'm like, you didn't define anything. You pencil. Like you
It
did
also
nothing.
it
Where's the
also usually
definition there, right?
exactly, but it also usually has to do with the reproduction of the species. So usually people assign women as someone who can get pregnant, and there are
And
many cisgendered women who can't get pregnant.
so many, so
Right.
many who can't, who don't want to, who refuse. I mean, so many, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's, for the sake of argument, for the sake of like narrowing the scope a little bit, because otherwise we're going to need a biologist. Let's go with the sex binary for a minute. Let's just deal in that part of the reality. And again, I say that part of the reality. So, when somebody is born, statistically speaking, a majority of us are born male or female with parts that are assigned that, that go with both. Now,
Right.
that's how we were born. Our gender, and some people say gender and sex are the same. I'm like, what's the point of the 2 words then? Stop it. Our gender is exactly what you said. And the way that I perceive it is our gender is um, how do we express ourselves? Absolutely. But the expectation of gender, and here's where we get into problems. When you're born a man or you're born a boy, here are
Hmm.
a list of the masculine gender qualities you're supposed to attribute or you're supposed to have. You're born
Right.
a girl, here are the list of the feminine you're supposed to have. So let's give a bit of that list. Just, let's just throw it out there. Give me some masculine identifiers.
So masculine identifiers that are traditional are
Yeah,
beards,
traditional.
like
Sorry?
bearded,
Beard,
strong,
facial hair. Yep.
strong,
Strong,
um, chiseled,
chiseled, short
uh,
hair,
short hair, handsome.
handsome.
And usually
Uh,
we use the word toward a woman, a handsome woman. It's said in a pejorative way.
yes,
So it's
absolutely it is.
interesting how we
It's
kind of use them to
backhanded
belittle women.
compliments. Yeah.
No, yeah,
Um, so those are some physical attributes. Men wear pants, men wear suits.
yep,
Here are some clothing options for men, right? There are some certain masculine jobs we would attribute to men, soldiers and construction and all of those heavy lifting jobs, yada yada yada. Now, there's also some emotional or intellectual more masculine categorization. What would you put in that list?
repeat the question.
Like, you just described being masculine as all physicality, but what about the emotional or mental aspects of
Oh,
what's, yeah,
cold,
cold, yep,
arrogant,
arrogant,
um, non-emotional, uh,
rational, absolutely,
stunted, very
uh-huh,
rational is one of them.
hmm,
Adventurous,
competitive.
competitive, obnoxious.
There it is.
It's
There's some of the
very like
masculine drivers, right?
right.
Some of the feminine drivers I'd include, like, for aesthetics, you have long hair, they're slight, they're thin, they're delicate, they, are nurturing, they're emotional, they're cooperative, they're loving caretakers,
Right.
right? Some of the jobs that go along with women, again, associate directly with the qualities we've already attributed to them. That's why they're the nurses and the hygienists and the teachers, especially elementary school teachers, mothers, obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
what we've done, what society has done,
Right.
created two lists, both physical and sort of emotional, that will apply to a baby as soon as it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
Quite literally, right? And studies have shown that as soon as a child is out of its mother, we ask if it's a boy or a girl, and then everything about the way that we interact with them changes,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
How we dress them, how we speak to them, how we hold them.
Mm-hmm.
Girls, we talk to quieter, softer. We tell them they're beautiful. We say they're going to break a lot of hearts. Boys, we hold out further. We jostle them around a little bit. We tell
Yep.
them, they're going to be a great linebacker, whatever we're going to put on them. And so
Heartbreaker.
from the binary of sex, we've created a binary, an almost instantaneous binary of gender characteristics that go with the sex. I have a question for you.
Yes.
Is any of that based in reality? Because you're going to have the Jordan Petersons, heaven help me, of this world, because they're so goddamn loud. Talk about how that's evolutionary, about
But,
how there's found, and we're not going to be able to get into, I mean, I'm
right.
not going to be able to get into like all sorts of different things when it comes to brain chemistry and what part of your hippocampus is bigger. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. But a lot of these people would say, listen, there's some biological realities that you can't just ignore. Like
Right.
Joanne, that you can't ignore. And let's bring a couple up, because I want to shut them down before they even start,
I
talking
just want
about
to say
it.
one thing. I
Yeah.
think that we also have to take into account this is exactly what you're saying um, is that these words that we're talking about, these words that we have assigned to people, I think like for centuries, society has sort of centered some people um, in the like centered them, and others they have kind of like ascribed to the margins of society. And I think that
Yeah.
for a long time, these monikers, these kind of like gendered phrases and words have not been looked at. And I think that when people like Jordan Peterson or people like Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene
Oh,
ask, what defines a woman? How would you define a woman? I think that we can say the definition of a woman and definition of a man and definition of all these different things are under review. Like
it's
a
a great.
cisgendered woman is a type of woman.
Mhm.
A trans woman is a type of woman. A black woman is a type of woman, because the definitions of all of these different kind of spaces may have intersection, but they're all vastly different definitions of what those
Mhm.
are. And I think that's something that,
That's a great. I like that answer.
thank you,
I really like. It's under review.
under
It's
review.
it's under review. We're gonna have to take a minute. Our team's gonna need to take a minute.
Yeah.
Um, what I also like about that is that, you know, we pretend as though definitions are naturally constructed.
Oh, right.
We
Like,
we
yeah.
pretend like we didn't make up words in the first
No.
place,
Exactly.
and we didn't
Exactly.
assign the meaning. Somehow it exists outside of our definitions, right?
Right.
I find that interesting. I also find this is the one question I always ask people when they do bring this to me. And they'll say, "Are you a guy or a girl?" Because that's the same question, right? What is a woman? Are you a guy or a girl? I mean, it's the
Right.
same. And my question is always this: why?
Well,
Why
exactly.
is the definition so important? Because your purpose of a definition is to marginalize and exclude. That's why you want to define this. You're not looking to define this. I can't. Stu, can you think of a functional purpose other than what bathroom we're going to use? And heaven forbid this be our biggest issue in the 2022. But I can't think of a need for a sociological definition of a woman to serve what purpose?
Well, this is the thing. It doesn't serve a purpose. It gives people the comfort in knowing where they can place you.
There it is.
And it's
There it is.
exactly the thing. It's a comfortable space to be in because people like labels. And if they
Yeah.
can't label something and someone cannot ascribe a definition to a
Mm-hmm.
label to feel more comfortable and to put you in a place, it's uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable space to
Absolutely.
be in. And I always say, especially when I'm doing some of these trainings, it's okay to feel like a discomfort because
Yeah.
when people feel discomfort, things change, things move on.
Yeah.
You have progress in society. You have new things created, new institutions created to make sure that that discomfort is recognized, torn down, pieced apart,
Mm-hmm.
and really figured out as to why that makes you uncomfortable. Is it something that goes against how you were raised, how you believe, what the definitions are, and how does it impact your life? So, like, we use gay marriage for just completely outside of this whole kind of conversation we're talking about because it's something people can assign to. Um, for a long time, people were like, no, marriage isn't really, it's an important word. That word means something.
Mm.
Therefore, it couldn't possibly mean something outside of a marriage between one man and one woman.
Right.
But because of that push, because of those conversations, because of that work on the back end from queer and the LGBTQIA community to kind of face those conversations and those issues head on and to push people into a space where they had to really reflect on what that word means,
Mm-hmm.
which at the end of the day is a union between two people, um, seen by the government, and like
Mm-hmm.
really it's a legal term.
Mm-hmm.
And like yes, there's some religious connotations to it as well, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's a legal word.
You check off that box. Are you married
Exactly.
or single? Every government and every form I've ever filled out says, "Are you married?" They don't say, "Was it a civil union?"
Right.
No, 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 no. The state recognizes marriage. That's the word they use too. So it can be religious, but it's also very much legal.
And it
Absolutely.
comes with benefits on the back end of it. Spousal benefits. It comes with being able to visit your spouse in the hospital. It becomes with um, a variety of different things when it comes to housing and family planning and security over having uh, children, making
Benefits,
sure
children. Yeah.
they're there. So it's there, and that's really something where people were like, "Oh, okay." And it was a long time fight, but once
Right.
we have this ability now, and it's the same word, because people for the longest time was like, "Well, why can't you be happy with civil union?"
Right.
Because it's not the same. It's why does it have to be different? Why do I have to be civilly union to
And the
somebody?
answer is it needs to be different because it always was.
Exactly,
That's their
100%.
answer, right? And
Right.
you tapped into something really, really important. And this is true for everybody. And I want everybody, again, who is listening or watching to understand that. And I'll let Stu, speak for themselves. But I, it's not like I'm comfortable with everything.
No.
It's not like I never go, oh, that was a change I wasn't ready for,
Right.
or that's a mistake that I made, or I can't really wrap my head around this, or, you know, and so to understand that we all balk at when our founding traditions are rocked, we feel unsteady. And our most significant foundational level of socialization is our gender. And I think that transfers and transcends religions and races and
Hmm.
countries and cultures. It is the fundamental basic building block how we thought we're going to build a functionalist society. And I also don't think somebody sitting at home going, how do we screw over women? I don't necessarily think that. I think that's how it progressed. But I also feel as though it's our foundational tradition, and our foundational tradition, when we start shaking that, people get uncomfortable.
You know what? Actually, Anne Hathaway actually is a really good quote, exactly what
I
you're
love
saying.
Anne Hathaway.
Um, I have it pulled up here. So I was looking for this one thing, and this is it. She says, I think one of the reasons why the idea of being transgender, being non binary, is so threatening, so upsetting to a lot of conservatives, especially conservative evangelicals, is because so much of their worldview is based on capitalistic patriarchy. And
Mhm.
coding men and women by hair, clothes, shoes, voice, makeup is an easy way for them to distinguish between competition and consumables.
It's perfect. That's a perfect definition. I was just saying this the other day. I don't remember what my because we were talking very much. I was talking about sexism, and then I read something that said 55% of white women voted for Trump, and and I was reading all like why would they do that, and what's that mentality, and you start to understand that part of the broken system we live in has trained some people, specifically a lot of white, cisgendered, straight women, that this is the best they've got. And the protection that they're going to garner, sure, they might be able to do it themselves, but you know who's going to do it for them? They're men. Whether
Right.
it's their dad, their brother, their husband, their boyfriend, it doesn't matter. But the men in my life are there for that. And they almost say it with pride, right? They say it with pride and they say it with, but that's just the balance of it all. And they don't even understand that they have been manipulated in order to buy into that system, to always have that man standing beside them, because if they don't have access. They consider themselves, even if it's subconsciously, just one down the totem pole. That's
Right.
horrible terminology I just used, but one
Yeah.
down the hierarchy. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Then I say something ridiculously insensitive to Indigenous people. Ridiculous.
But
Sometimes
like,
it slips out.
I think what when we talk about like what can define a woman, I think what is easier to say out loud and to define is like what a woman isn't. So like for example, a woman is not a sex toy for men. A
Oh,
woman
sure.
is
There
not
we go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a walking incubator for men to control and legislate.
Mhm.
It's a woman is not the primary caregiver of the children at home.
Listen, I'm still trying to wrap my head around why do we need the definition?
Well, that's the thing, and again, I'll go back to the fact that definitions make people feel more comfortable. And I also think definitions have power to them as well. So when people are undefined and have no definition in society, it's a disservice to them because they can't assign themselves to a space. I think that we can, yes, live in this world of gray area, but unfortunately, we live in a society that is dictated by words and their definitions and their meaning and the power they hold for certain
Mhm.
people. So being undefined, yes, in the abstract, works amazingly. Yes,
Yeah,
live outside of the of
sure.
a literary definition, but if you start bringing that back into the framework of our society, it doesn't work because
But it's
people
so
need definitions.
But it's so funny because you start bringing it back, and then I go back to those little gender boxes that I listed earlier of what masculine and feminine look like, and I
Right.
start to look around at the people in this world, and guess what? I don't care if you're Laura Boebert or if you're Donald Trump or if you're any of these other idiots professing such vile hatred, bigotry.
Yeah.
You don't fit in that by yourself either. Donald
Right.
Trump's hands are as soft as a baby's butt. He hasn't done a hard day's labor in his life. That man couldn't change a tire. Laura Boebert had her little, shooter cafe or whatever god awful restaurant that drug dealer closed, which makes my heart sing. Um, she had guns on the hips of all of her female identified, um, servers.
Right.
So the more that I look around, I see a woman wearing pants. What are you doing? I see a guy being nice to their kid and having an emotional bond. Are you crazy? Like
Yeah.
everywhere. Nobody. If you believe in it 100%, if you're thinking, Joanna, you're full of it, I promise you, right now, you have traits that don't just fit in whatever either the feminine or the, there's not a single person on this planet.
No,
We're still
exactly. And
lying to ourselves.
100%. And I think that you're hitting the nail on the head because like um my version of how I would say that I am male presenting and feel the way inside. I think my experience is very different from another one, my male presenting friends. That I
Sure.
don't have the same one. Same as yours with any other woman that you come in contact with, or female um, presenting. But also, um, people are so quick to be like everyone has the same experience, and
Hmm.
we ascribe that to uh, transgender people as well, is that their transitions are exactly the same, that they
Hmm.
follow a sort of pattern, and that's comfortable for us
Sure.
because then we can feel, if we're an ally, how best to support them at this stage of their transition, how best to support them now, how best to talk about it with them.
Hmm.
And really, what we tend to forget about everyone's experience is that just because you have gone through something does not mean you're experiencing it at the same way that this other person has. So
Absolutely.
while you can empathize, you don't know the track they're on or where they are in that process. And really, it's none of your business. You can just simply be there. And if
Yeah.
they choose to bring you into that, then it's fine. But I agree with you, is
Well,
that
there's siblings that wouldn't even understand. Like,
right,
think about that, right? There's siblings that can't even understand each other. They
right,
grew up in the same house, same conditions, same everything, and all of a sudden you're two completely different people. How on God's green earth did that happen?
right.
Because all the socialization we do is wasteful. I
Yes,
truly believe that. It is wasteful and it is stunting of every single person's potential capacity.
right.
Everybody's. I don't care who you are. Every single person would be a better person today. And by better person, I don't mean rich. I don't mean, having more money. I mean, you will be a better version, a more true version of who you really wanted to be, given your genetic makeup, given your experience, given your blood memory, given all of those things.
Hmm.
If nobody got in your way and said, here, take this math class, you're not supposed to take home ec. Here,
Right.
wear this, you're not supposed to wear that. Here, listen to this kind of music, you shouldn't listen to that. Guys, we would be, people say, well, look at what it's done for us so far, right? That's what the Petersons love to say. Well, look at what men have built. I'm like, oh, for Christ's sake. Yeah, okay. But what do you think we could have done differently or built better
But
had we
this,
not just allowed men to be that driving? You know what I'm saying? How do you know
yeah.
where we'd be?
Well, that's the interesting thing. I think I was watching. I was. Let me start. I was um I was actually watching a couple of um, indigenous queer creators
Mhm.
talking about how the gender binary is a tool of oppression, and it was weaponized to justify colonization.
Yes.
Um, Basically, and I think we all can say this, was the Europeans came over, thought they were so much more civilized, so much closer to
Yeah.
God. Love that religion. Than the savages in quotation marks,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
who embraced these like gender nuanced roles that had a wider definition for what these things meant, and
Mhm.
it made it more of a human existence. And I think it's like the colonizers marked the indigenous gender and sexual variance as inferior, which
Mhm.
I think is really, really interesting. Um,
Yeah.
but also, everything pulls back to, like we were saying, everything is pulled back to white, cisgendered, heterosexual manhood,
Yeah.
and how everybody outside of that is then classified in the margins of society. Our
Mhm.
society is built for a white, cisgendered, heterosexual man, and everyone else around that is in representation or reaction to that.
And it's funny because I think a lot about people who, those anthropologists, those biological anthropologists who like to explain everything. Then I'm like, and they'll always go back to, well, in the caveman. Have you seen? Have you seen the bone structure of a woman from
Yes.
that era? You think she was delicate?
I just love, you have to love when people are like, yeah, but what about the cavemen? And you're like, what about them?
Go look at them. Go ahead. Try to distinguish between the men and the women. Go ahead. You can't. You can't. Unless one's giving birth in that moment, you can't. Because I'm telling you right now, they're all covered in hair, ginormous, and they could snap you like a twig. So,
Literally.
stop it. It's
Yeah.
just, and I'm going to ask you a really question. Now, this question might be offensive,
Okay.
but I'm going to say it anyways because I think about it often.
Okay.
Do you think, so first, let me preface this by talking about the difference between somebody who's transgendered. There are people who are transgendered who literally will change, let's say, their gender expression, but have no desire to change themselves physically. They are not going to get any surgeries. They are not going to take a hormone. So
Hmm.
there's those kind, just like you were saying, there's many types, right? And I'm only going to define 3 different types, even though there would be a multitude.
Like the different
Those people,
experiences.
they
Yeah.
would still consider themselves transgender. They might still want to be referred to, in the other, with the other pronoun, yada, yada. Then there's some people who might take hormones, might get surgery, or might get no surgery at all because they don't
Hmm.
feel as though they need to do that to be complete. And then there's other people who fully, let's say, fully transition, and I probably hate the use of that word, but they fully transition surgically so that anatomically, they match what societal's perception is of a woman or a man. Here's my question.
Hmm.
Do you think, this is a doozy, because this one also applies to the gays.
Oh, fun.
Do you, well, I think it's where it gets messy.
No, yeah.
Do you think that if we never had the binary, if we never forced the gender roles upon men and women, we never had it, how many people would have to identify A, as trans, because I think or B, don't feel the need to change their body because the binary doesn't exist and they don't feel the need to have to fit into a pre-existing oppressive binary structure. I either have to present as a man to this society or as a woman because they're not accepting me any other way. Do you understand my question?
I do, yeah. Um,
Because if we blow up the association, we're left with the parts, right? The body parts.
right.
And if we're left with the body parts, but
So you're basically saying if we were to have no gender binary, therefore no definition or word for man or woman, would there be a need to transition at all?
yeah,
I mean, I think it's no.
I don't have any idea how we ever figure that out.
I mean, like, if off the top of my head, and I kind of like my first gut reaction is no, but I think the term transition is something that we have said from transitioning from one to the other.
Yep, because it's
Um,
still existing in that binary.
right. But I think if you were to remove the binary, then the existence in this kind of variation of personhood and like the physicality of it, I think there would still be, for some people, the want to resemble something that they don't have. But I don't
Sure.
know
So
what
they
you'd
want
call it.
it. I find this question
Yeah,
fascinating, right? Because
right. Because it's
because I
more about,
also think that it's pushed a lot of, because you separated sexuality back there for a second and you did a really
yeah.
good job of separating our physical attraction and our emotional attraction.
Mhm. Right.
And I think what socialization has done is really fucked up the emotional. Because what we've done, think about it. Think about how stupid this is. And every time I
Mhm.
say this, I think of Women Are From Mars, Men Are From Venus, that dumb ass book that has apparently stood the test of time.
I don't know how.
Think about it. If we socialize women to be A, give them the right toys and the right ways of interacting and communicating and all those things we put upon little girls, right? And then we put upon things on little boys. And we wonder why, when these two people grow up and need to procreate, they can barely stand in the same house with the opposite sex because they can't communicate. They have no binding anything anymore because we've socialized it the hell out of them. So
Mm,
guys still need to have guys' nights. Not that you don't need to have friends. I'm not advocating don't have friends, but this notion of boys' night and girls' night is there because those kinds of socialization are more important to us and we feel more comfortable. It's why we talk to our girlfriends when we have
right,
issues. I
right.
think socialization of gender norms to perpetuate heterosexuality, in fact, is exactly what's bringing heterosexuality down.
I mean, it's definitely something that is should be talked about more because the idea that there are sexualized and sort of gendered behaviors and practices and ways of having fun and kind of
Mm,
socializing with friends is insane because like I
it's insane.
it's insane to me. I mean, they're it's something that I find that I always say to people as well is that like clothes have no gender. If you want to wear a dress, wear a dress. If you want to wear shoes, like high heels for high heels. Um,
God bless.
go. I mean,
Have a
like
good time.
exactly. Do it,
Yeah.
live it, breathe it. If you feel comfortable and good and and attractive in a piece of clothing that maybe is not something that people have said is okay for the gender or your gender identity or expression, or the sex you were assigned at birth, who the f cares? At the end of the day, your life is your own, and if you should try to live your life with as little regret as possible, and something as easy as clothing,
Mhm.
we've assigned so much to it,
So much.
like, and it's become something that unfortunately for something that means very little in the scope of the world, we've made so important.
Yeah. Well,
um
we make it incredibly important not only to genderize and to put you in boxes, but we've made it important to give legitimacy to a person, to give power to a person, to
right.
give
Yeah.
a semblance of authority to a person. And we've talked about this, right? What am I wearing right now? I'm wearing a hoodie and a toque. Why? Why me wearing this would make me a worse prime minister?
You wouldn't, but the
But it
thing is
would.
with it,
I would never get elected.
yeah.
Could you imagine if I rolled up, I got elected, and I rolled up to go shake the hand of, I don't know, the president of Burundi, and they'd be like, "What is?" We have given so much weight to clothes. Not
Hmm.
only do we discount people because of it, obviously, like time and time again. No, you're not this, you're not that, you're whatever. Here's the even scarier crap. We've given respect. We
Mm.
give them the benefit of the doubt. We open doors. We grant them access because what? They know how to do a Windsor knot, or their skirt is the perfect length for a political
Yeah.
figure as a woman? What is wrong with us?
Yeah.
And then we have people all over the place advocating that this is what we should do because dressing a certain way makes us feel a certain way. Bullshit. Dressing a certain way makes us feel a certain way because we get responses in a certain way. It has nothing to do with the skirt in and of itself. It has to do with when I wear it, how am I treated?
Right.
There's no power in that outfit. There's power in the perception you get or the reaction you get and the interaction you get because of that outfit.
So you're kind of saying that because I feel powerful, just say I feel powerful in a pantsuit. The
Mm-hmm.
feeling of power comes from the outward influences of me wearing that outfit or an outfit
Of course
similar
they
to
do.
that. So I interesting.
And
Yeah.
it comes in, everybody would say, no, 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 I just feel it. And I'd say, you can't
But
step
you
out of
can't
the
feel something.
socialization of the last 40
Right.
years, however old I'm 47. I can't step out of that socialization and pretend as though I don't have a conscious, or at the very least, subconscious recognition of what this outfit and this aesthetic is going to get me when I walk into the world. Of course I do.
Right.
And everybody that says, Joe, men and women are just different, I'm like, you know what? Nobody's ever, we can't do this experiment. But at the end of the day, you need to, how could we ever know what is truly in somebody's nature? Because everybody's been brought up in a society.
Hmm. I think going back to your original question, the gender expression versus the kind of presentation of like if there was no gender binary, would there be a need to transition? And I think that no, it wouldn't be classified as that. But I think it's but then you can't really if you're using the term of like throw out society altogether, then
I'm
I
just
still
saying
I s-
maybe.
yeah, no, I still think this is like my very um I've been thinking about it as you've been talking, and I think like if you were to kind of use the same definition of how we talk with a gender unicorn, but again, like that's something that was created in a societal
In a binary.
in a binary to explain things outside the margins. But if it's like how I look and express myself, if you see something and you want
Yeah.
to emulate that,
Okay. So we're
then
back at socialization then.
yeah. But I think it's something that if we were to move it all, and there were just two people existing in the world undefined, and there was something about that person that you could emulate.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's socialization, but it's socialization that you are
Sure.
taking upon yourself. So, but is it like
Maybe.
that's the
Maybe.
thing? I don't
Maybe.
know. But
But
again, like
then,
you're sort of saying, like, because I think that human beings are always going to assign. Um, I think they're always going to assign value in a certain look, thing, place,
mm-hmm,
because
I
it
agree.
creates a hierarchy to
That,
aspire
yeah.
to
Sure.
aspiration. So I think that while I want to say that it wouldn't exist altogether and there wouldn't be a need for anyone to have to transition or to define themselves, I do think that as humanity, as we've seen through the ages, thrives off competition and emulation. And I think that if people if people see something and they want to be that thing,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to try to not recreate it, but make it their own on their own body. And of course, there are definite
Sure.
um, uh, limitations at times to some of these things. But
I'm wondering that if we had such incredible, if boom, we just snap our fingers, no more gender binaries. I'm
right,
wondering if the physicality A becomes less important and then B becomes much more diverse in and of itself, right? So you could have women, cis-born women, all of a sudden wanting lots of muscle. That's just the aesthetic they like. They just want muscle, right? And by virtue of that, a lot of like female bodybuilders, stuff like that, they tend to lose all breast tissue. Like they tend to not have it. That's their aesthetic. That's what they want. So maybe if we blow that up, we start. See, I don't. Everybody talks about how many genders there are. See, I don't think there are any. I think they're infinite. I think gender identity is infinite because if there's 7 billion people on the planet, I'm saying right now there are 7 billion gender identities because no person is the same.
right.
Simple, right?
Mhm.
And I'm saying if we can blow that up, then maybe some people are like, because now we're down to what? A couple of body parts? Is this what we're really talking about? Right? We're down
It's interesting. Yeah,
we're
it's
down to
interesting.
a couple of body parts.
Yeah,
Because everything else, muscle and look, we have a huge plastic surgery industry in this country and in the United States that allows people to build themselves up to be whatever version of a person they are. Nobody seems to be having a problem with that. If you want to add breast tissue, you're normal and healthy and amazing, and now you look like a supermodel. If you want to take breast tissue away, you're a deviant and you need psychological help. Who is at the head of that line?
as long as you remove it all. If you remove some, you're like, oh,
Some's fine. But if
Yeah,
you're just like,
sperm is
no,
fine.
these serve no purpose. I would like to have no shirt on. I like that. I like that aesthetic. Oh, no, now you got to see a psychiatrist for a year before we make that decision, love.
Well, that's the most annoying part is the fact that, um, and like I get why it's like it's an insurance and protection for medical practitioners, but and surgeons, but to have like levels to make sure that if they were to help remove someone's breast tissue, they can't be sued later on for
But
negligence.
again,
But again,
Stu,
like what I was going to say was, it's insane to me that we subject when someone says, "This is who I am and this is how I want my body to look," that we subject them to a year of therapy for
mhm,
someone else
you have to
to
live like the other side. Yeah,
yeah, you have to, but for someone else to then validate your feeling in your own body.
yeah.
That's
But but
what's somewhat
but
crazy to me.
if I wanted right now a calf implant, sign me up. Here's the check for $50,000 or however much it pays. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Stuart, you can get a heightening surgery. Wait till I describe the surgery, where they break your calves, they insert a 2-inch spacer, and you lie in traction for 6 weeks.
Hmm. Yep.
Two
No.
inches.
Yep.
We don't think that requires a little bit of psychiatric. What are
It's,
you doing
oh,
outside of the cost? Think of
God.
the danger.
Yeah. Because then
We have
also,
men and women who have died on the table getting facelifts. They know the risk, right? Because they're
yep.
older. They don't care. I'm not saying we should be giving them psychiatric treatment. I am
Right.
saying there's a lot of people, billions of an industry wanting to change their body all the way. And what I have a huge problem with is if society agrees with it, we pat them on the back, we call them hot, and we put them on the cover of a movie magazine. And if we disagree with it, we call them sick and demented and broken and whatever other horrific
Yep.
euphemism or whatever else we can apply to those guys directly. And
Yep.
I
It's
think
terrible.
we need to start being honest about that,
Yeah.
right? Because at the base, and then the more I think about it, the more that I see how fundamentally at the basis of a lot of it is this notion. Because I've never had I don't like functionalists. I don't like people who say, well, there's pink jobs and blue jobs. Girls do this, guys do this. Why? Because society works better. I've never bought into that. But here's the problem. That's not just how what we've done. What we've done is said they're pink jobs and blue jobs, but the blue jobs are so much more important. Those are the really important jobs, right?
Yeah.
And then we've even adjusted it because I started really listening to, like, let's talk about men's testosterone and aggression levels, right? Let's really talk
Yeah.
about that for a second. If that's true, if this hormone is the defining feature of a man, right? And it's so irregulated, and by the way, you guys get fluctuations of it left, right, and center, and you never know when it's coming. If that's true and you're so violent, why the hell are we letting you run political systems?
That's the question. What's this question? Because that's usually what's thrown back at.
Shouldn't you just be digging ditches somewhere with all that hyped up energy?
We should be out there punching trees.
Yeah, you punch trees, but the women should tell you where and when to punch because you guys don't have any control of that, right? Everybody talks
Well,
about women and
exactly.
estrogen, but guys, you guys have, I didn't know this until very recently, these spikes of testosterone. And depending on the guy, you can
Yeah.
have huge gradiences between, rationality and not so much. And we don't
Yeah.
talk about that,
No.
right?
Um. It's hormone cycles. They call it. It's funny. It's they. There's a whole article on Healthline years ago that came out and said, "Do cisgendered men get periods?" And it's true. They don't get the periods in the same sense that we think, but there is um, hormonal changes they experience throughout the month that is, they call it a menstruation or a male period,
Well,
where it's just the oscillating hormones.
mhm.
specifically testosterone, that kind of dip.
And that has a significant impact on people. And the fact that we just negate talking about it, we also
Oh
call
yeah.
men aren't emotional. But why aren't there so many goddamn fights?
Oh my
Because we
God,
just
I'm
don't
so
count that as an we don't count aggression as an emotion.
no, not at all. No, that's
Not an
a
emotion.
strength. No,
It's just the crying that's an emotion. The
yeah,
aggression, not an emotion. That's just boys being boys. It's like we negate parts
yeah.
of ourselves to prove a binary and a list of subsets that never existed in the, and it's just so exhausting.
It's just it is exhausting. It is 100% exhausting, and it's something that I unfortunately think that we're going to be dealing with for a while, because the
100%.
more that someone tries to push, and I think it's important, like I said before, it's very,
Mm-hmm.
very important to be pushed into discomfort and society to be pushed into discomfort and have these kind of hard and chewy conversations that are
Mm-hmm.
very crunchy. Um, but oftentimes when that happens, there is a subsect of the society who will double down, very
Sure.
similar to what we're seeing right now,
Yeah.
where they feel so triggered, so uncomfortable, like something is being stolen from them,
Yeah. Well,
that
because they
they,
benefited from it.
right,
They're
but it
okay
ends
with it.
up 100%, but oftentimes it ends up the most marginalized in society are the ones that are affected the most and punished the most,
Mm.
um,
For
and
trying to police
victimized,
it.
which is horrible. Like right now, you what you see in the States and throughout Canada as well, and other parts of the world, but specifically when I talk about the States. And I think I would love to say, I just want to make sure that anyone who hears this who lives in the States, I always feel like I am shitting on them by bringing up all these things. And I'm not. What I'm using this as is because Canada is a lot better at not talking about these things. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
the same public system or
Yep.
media uh,
Coverage and outlets.
machine and coverage
Yeah.
about these things. We're very it's under the surface and a lot more insidious
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
in its kind of like rollout. Whereas the States, it's everything is in the cover, sensationalized, large, huge, talked about no matter what. So it's easier to talk about this because people will have heard about these
Mm-hmm.
things. But it's in no way saying that Canada and the States are so vastly different in how their treatment of minorities. We both countries have their problems, um, but you
And I genuinely think, and that's why I really want to have these conversations and continue having them, because I genuinely think, without a question in my head, that the vast majority of people are loving. They want the same things as everybody else. They want their families to do well. They want to be healthy and happy and successful, and they want to have a good time. And the notion that they're, fundamentally bigoted and hateful, it doesn't exist. There are those people, but I still say the vast majority of people aren't that. And if we can at least sit down at the table and have a discussion and have the conversation and have the hard questions that sometimes sound ridiculous, or have the hard questions that might even sound offensive,
right,
we got to be careful and listen to the intent of the question and then educate to the best we can, because that's the only way we're going to move the dial. We are not going to move
agree.
the dial. I don't think I'm going to move the dial when I walk into a crowded women's bathroom and somebody goes, well, aren't you a guy? I'm not
Mhm.
going to move the dial by screaming at that person. I'm just not. And that puts a lot of weight. I also get this, puts a lot of weight on people facing that kind of situation. But the importance of us being able to have the conversation, or know the difference between somebody looking at me and goes, oh, excuse me, sir. That's different than if somebody said, excuse me, sir. We have to, we have to hear the difference between those two people
Yes,
as it applies to everything in this world. We have to, no matter how big the chip is on our shoulder, no matter how much we've been through, I implore people to hear the difference between the person who is being hateful and bigoted. You can call them hun, do whatever you got to do, and the person who just
I call
didn't
them
know.
bestie.
The person, and then the person that just didn't know. Because the person that just didn't know, if I turn around and I laugh or I smile, and they're like, "Oh, this is what I get. I'm so sorry." I'm like, "That's okay. You're polite with the sir. It's just not who I am." But whatever. They'll never forget that interaction.
Right.
And they'll be more open to a little bit more change, to a little bit more fluidity, you know?
I think I said this to you before, and I get a lot of. I completely agree with you on. I'm going to flip it to something else as well. Is that I make videos where I laugh at
Stupidity. Yeah.
Trumpian Republican rhetoric.
Mhm.
Because here's what I tend to think. What I find most frustrating about these people is a lot of what they're saying they know is garbage. They
Mhm.
know is bombastic,
Yes,
ridiculous slop. That they are
absolutely.
serving their constituents and they're fear mongering.
Mhm.
And what I find most toxic about and kind of pervasive about what they're doing is they're allowing these garbage statements that they know to be wrong, false, or lie,
Mhm.
blatantly untrue, or just so sensationalist in how they're saying it. They're going to go on a news network and they're going to be placed next to somebody who is well thought out, well
Mhm.
articulated, well reasoned, and well spoken. And that person who is well reasoned, well spoken, well educated is going to have to give some validity to that statement that these people are making to negate it, which
Yeah,
then
that's a
has
great point.
people think there is something behind that statement that is true.
Yeah,
And then they can argue it. They're arguing suddenly about this garbage, untrue, completely fabricated, bombastic statement that
yeah,
has no business being even talked about. And I have no patience anymore. I used to sit there and be like, let's talk about it, let's argue about it. Why?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Why?
But that's
I
the
would,
difference.
if a child said it, if a teenager said it, you would laugh in their face and you
Yeah,
would be like, okay, move on. But what I hope to bring awareness to is if I'm laughing at it, I'm not saying anything about their point. I
yeah,
am laughing at their point and being like, what is going on?
yeah.
Because it, even in my comment section, people are like, well, she didn't mean that. And they're bending over backwards trying to find some
Explain.
sort of explain or truth or a reasoned point in this ridiculousness. And oftentimes they're talking themselves out of it as they're doing it because they're realizing how stupid it is. I'm not saying, but this is also not a Republican or a Democrat or a independent comment. There are idiots and
They
garbage people in
abound.
the Democratic Party,
Mhm.
Republican, but like it upsets me that you have even Republicans in the same party, quote unquote, as these people having to also argue reason and well educated intent. I think I took a couple of podcasts ago with you where I found myself siding with Mitt Romney, which literally makes you want to hollow out my insides because I
And
can't believe it's come to a point now where I'm like, well, it's not that bad. And also,
yeah,
like, did you like
exactly.
comparatively,
Well, they've really set the bar low, right?
right? And that's the thing is like, what I think when Donald Trump was elected into office, I think I asked, because I had a friend who was American who voted for them. I said, at what point do you have to say this person does not represent the values in which I would like to be seen? They're the most public face of your party, of the political ideologies and the societal tenets of what makes you follow this tribe of people.
Mhm.
Is this really the representation that you want? You can believe everything and want to be fiscally conservative and all these things, but at what point can you step back for a second and be like, you know what? This person is not fit to run the party. We need someone else who better aligns and can better lead the party into
Yeah.
and the country into more prosperous thing. And I think that when you have these people kind of going back to what we were talking about, victimizing and vilifying and going after, you have an entire subsect of that party, the followers and the voters who are defending these horrible things. And I often now I'm thinking, see, you've mentioned it. If you were to remove that gender binary or that binary from the equation, who are they going to vilify then?
Although, well, and that's a, you know what, Stu? I think I want to end on that because I think this is our podcast part two. I honestly want you to come back and I want to start exactly where we left off because this is led into who are they going to vilify? That is the perfect question that speaks to the way that the political system is framed, why we are trading intelligent, intellectual people for 140 characters and a simplified, watered down version of reality. Why are we doing that? Because I think we're doing it all over the place, by the way. We're
Right.
doing
I
it
agree.
everywhere. So why are we doing that? Why is the vilification the quickest way to the top?
Right.
And why is the oversimplify why do we keep mistaking, and this is going to be in our part two, why do we keep mistaking authenticity for somebody who is simple and for the better part stupid?
It's I agree. It's a question that I ask myself.
No, I'm going to write
Why
them
do
down
we
right now,
yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's
Why are
it's
we
terrible.
trading it on this?
Right. Because it's funny, like you want to go back to the binary, you tell your sons and your daughters, if we're going strictly off the binary, you tell your sons and your daughters to want better for themselves,
Mm-hmm,
to look for partners romantically, for friends that kind of um, give value to these
mm-hmm,
friendships, to have these jobs that make them better, these experiences that make them better, but you don't
mm-hmm.
expect that same thing from your political figures. That the
But
people that
and
you
it's
would
even
not
funny,
have at your
everything's a binary.
right, but the people that you would not have, that you have gone on record and saying you would not have in your home,
Mm-hmm,
would not want to date your children, would not want to have your dinner table, but you're okay with them legislating for
mm-hmm.
you. That's
We see
that's something.
everything needs to be blown up. Every single this notion of a better future. What the fuck? Does that mean more
Right,
money? Are we just talking about money? Is that the only indicator here? Because we keep saying stuff like that. What's a better future? When are we
right,
better off? Well, look, we talk about the 1950s, how we were so great then. You know what was going on in the 50s? Horrific levels of child abuse and spouse abuse, horrific levels of civil rights abuse, horrific. All of that was going on. And you're talking about a booming economy. So,
yeah,
is your only indicator of what a better life looks like a booming economy? Because I'm not with you. But there's the problem, Stu.
hmm
Somebody's selling snake oil everywhere and
right,
just giving them talking about one indicator. And when you talk about one indicator, you sound like a superstar. You sound like you're going to give them the world. And we're all freaking shocked when it all goes to crap. But the reality is, a better future is complicated, intricate, and it intersects with many, many, many different avenues. You can't just have one. So that's why people, though, would rather hear somebody say, you're going to have a better future. Make America great again. Why? Well, it's a nice little short thing that makes me think it's going to be nice, even in a time where it wasn't so nice.
right, right.
All right, Stu, can you tell the people, please, where to find you before we do? And we're going to come back and do part two, guys. Democracy in peril.
So
Stu,
you
can
can
you tell everybody where to find you, please?
yeah, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Janikon, JANIKON_. And you can find me and Joanna soon on the podcast Rebel Without a Closet on
It's
Spotify,
amazing.
Apple Music.
All streaming platforms. I will put all of your stuff right below your little description, right below the video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Stu, thank you so much once again for coming.
I loved it.
I will see you next time. Same bat station, folks. Dismissed.